Hello and welcome back to Inquisitor Martyr. Last time we finished the storyline for the main campaign and started up the Prophecy DLC campaign. Got some different gear, nothing too fancy. And that's really about it. So let's jump back into the missions.
Inquisitor, the Argos are detecting significant hostile forces on this level. Are you absolutely sure you want to go in alone?
I can't allow the Xenos to take the Alpha Pariah. Knowing what I do about her, it could have catastrophic consequences.
So I was looking at this on Bella Lost Souls, and they had an article, and I thought it was funny because I didn't realize it, but they ended up calling Abaddon or Abaddon, once again, depending on how you pronounce it. I've heard it both ways, so we'll go with Abaddon because that's what I hear the most when it comes to 40K. But they were calling him Abaddon the Retconner because apparently I didn't even realize this. In some of the it was like one of the codices, they ended up reworking his lore so that the 13 Black Crusades weren't all failures. And I was a bit disappointed because I liked having it where he would just get pushed back to the what is it? Eye of the Warp? Oh my god, I have to look now. I'm actually going to take the moment to look at this, just to be sure. Let's see, where'd they say it? The Eye of Terror, that's what it is. I forget the existence of that place half the time. But they redid his lore to say that, yeah, he would always fall back to the Eye of Terror, but his crusades were always a success because he managed to complete his objectives. And I sat there thinking, okay, I get it. You want to make him look a bit better, but they list off what each objective was, and it feels kinda dumb. Because you have all these objectives that he completed, but they all just feel like really weird loose threads. Like, I'll read them off quick. Starting with the first Black Crusade, Abaddon claims the Demon Sword Dracnian. Second, topples the Eldritch Needles, which were Blackstone pylons, and frees Nemesis Tessera. Third Crusade destroys the tomb of, I think that's Saint Gerstal, and prevents a prophecy coming to pass. Fourth, shatters the Empiric Barrier at the Citadel of Cromark, weakening the barrier between the warp and reality. Fifth, destroys shrines and temples across worlds, dozens of worlds, weakening the warp seals and allowing demons to cross over, and destroys 2 Space Marine chapters in the process. Sixth, topples Forge World Arkwreath and takes control of the Sons of the Eye. Seventh, Abaddon, or did I say Abaddon or Abaddon? Abaddon, yeah. Bests the Blood Angels in a battle of the Ghost War. The fallen Blood Angels' bodies are unrecoverable. Eighth, forces cull precise numbers of Imperial citizens in the name of Tzeentch, which activates 9 living metal monoliths, which then melt and presumably weaken the barrier between warp and real space. The ninth, ravages a sector of real space at will due to some sneaky tricks, and this weakens the walls of reality in that sector. 10th, invades the Helica sector and focuses on weakening the Iron Hands chapter, gains valuable intel in the Medusa system before leaving. 11 captures weird boys and uses them in a Wa demon hybrid ritual to weaken the Relorian system. 12th captures 2 Blackstone fortresses in the Gothic War, and then the 13th Black Crusade with a death toll in the trillions. Abaddon destroys Cadia and the pylons that kept the warp at bay and unleashes the Great Rift in the galaxy. It feels so cheap to sit down and just be like, oh yeah, so he did all these things in these locations, and it means something, I swear, guys. It just seems so dumb to me. Because like I said, this feels like a bunch of loose plot threads then. And it leaves the door open for a lot more problems. Because then it's like, oh, so you can use orcs for some weird rituals? Why don't more orcs get captured then? I mean, they're kind of dumb. You should be able to trick them pretty easily. And then, of course, what's that ritual really do? Does it just weaken the walls of reality? Because then why wouldn't you just keep doing it and remove the walls of keeping the warp out from reality? The Blood Angels not being able to recover their dead doesn't really make sense either. Because then the question becomes, what good does that do? The Blood Angels are defective. They have the Black Thirst, I think it is. Or Red Thirst. Red Thirst? Yeah, I think it's Red Thirst. They become psychopaths. What use is that? Why would you would you utilize that within Chaos? You already deal with psychopaths. You don't need completely unhinged psychopaths. That's already a bit in the lore that a lot of the dreadnoughts for Chaos, the inhabitants in them have been entombed for so long they're crazy. You know, when you already have to essentially pop a dude out of his mech suit so he doesn't go crazy and butcher everyone on a ship, why would you want to do that to dudes who are just running around? So that doesn't make sense. Getting information on the Medusa sector. Did you really need to wage a war to do that one? Because that feels like one of those things where you can just send a ship of guys and be like, yeah, go look around or something. Waging war just seems like a very convoluted way of doing it. Some of the other ones just... I don't like the whole, oh, well, we're weakening the barrier between the warp and reality here. You better do something useful with that bit, or it's just a wasted story beat. Plain as that. Because stuff like that, it's just like the... What is it? There's one sector. I cannot remember the name of it for the life of me. I'm not going to look it up because I'd have to flounder for a bit. But they have this weird anomaly in space where it continually loops this ship, sending out a distress sequence and then getting like sucked away into the warp. And people have ended up getting, like, they'll go to the ship to try to help and they disappear too. So it's this creepy ghost ship. But nothing comes of that. They wrote about it, were like, yeah, isn't this totally friggin' spooky? And then just dropped it. There's, I think it's the same system or same region. There was a mining expedition with a big mining ship and all this. They found the ship and the crew, but the crew was... The ship was completely taken apart and laid out in a pattern, like piece by piece, like you would if you're building a model. And so were the crew. Completely disassembled, Limbs, organs, everything taken apart and laid out in a neat, orderly fashion. Was that ever touched upon again? No! It's just like, yeah, isn't this some spooky-ass stuff out here in space? Meanwhile, we gotta talk about Abaddon. Or Abaddon. I hate having a person with two different pronunciations. I guess it's Abaddon. Or no, it's Abaddon, because they say Abaddon the Despoiler. I hate it. But, back to my point. It just feels like more loose ends that will probably never come to fruition. Because it's probably stuff that Games Workshop forgot was a thing. This lore change is only a couple years old, and I bet you $5 here now, they probably already forgot it. There's a good chance they're like, oh shit, we wrote that? And they'd probably just be like, well, I'm not doing anything with it, so it can just sit there and be useless. And I get it. There's a lot going on in a setting that spans the entire galaxy with constant conflict at every waking moment. But at a certain point, you have to sit down and say, hey, we need to kind of condense what we're writing, or at least willingly touch on these subjects. No, hey, we added this thing. Should we do something with it? Probably. At least have it end somewhat. Even if it pans out to just be like, hey, those people got dissected. There's a spooky-ass monster just living in space. We lost some space marines who were sent to kill it. The end. I would accept that. Because then it's like, oh, okay. Steps were taken, casualties were sustained, and then nobody wants to deal with it again, and the most believable explanation would be nobody's going to touch it until it starts causing problems again. That is lore that I 100% would get behind and understand, because it's completely understandable. Mysterious Harlequin. I just don't like retconning. I don't like retcons unless they're justifiable. And making Abaddon just look better, that's not a good enough one for me. And the thing is, they could have said, oh yeah, he did these things, but they weren't his primary goal. You know, he was trying to do something else, and he just got pummeled and forced out. That would be fine. Oh, hey, yeah, that Orc Warp Ritual, turns out it was actually a plan to try to make Chaos Orcs. You know, okay. Makes sense. Oh, he failed because he got stopped in time. Okay, that makes sense as well. I would completely buy that. That would be lore that makes sense. As opposed to just like, yeah, it weakens the barriers to reality like everything else does. Why are the barriers to reality apparently the most flimsy as hell thing? That is just like, oh yeah, so you can just like break some seals, burn down a thing, sacrifice a bunch of dudes, you know, hop on one foot and eat a hot dog on a Thursday afternoon when it's raining out, any of these things, and the whole walls of reality just start crumbling. Demons will pour out, it's a whole song and dance. It just comes off as really stupid. Because then it raises the question, okay, so there's been chaos and cults and all this stuff all over for thousands of years within the lore. Why did it take this long for anybody to do this? You're telling me no one at any point in the lore managed to scoop up a couple weird boys and were like, hey, we should try, like, sacrificing these guys? And then having it work. Especially when you look at, like, Thousand Sons. Hey, the magic people. Why aren't they the ones who are like, oh yeah, we did that, like, 700 years ago? Yeah, Abaddon, you're just like catching up. We did that. The whole thing worked. Wasn't that great? It just comes off as dumb. Or killing Blood Angels. They're Space Marines. They're not invincible. They don't go down as easy as, say, an Imperial Guardsman, but they do die. And like I said, is the victory denying them Gene Seed? Because that's kind of a flimsy one, considering half the time in the lore you find stuff where guys are like, oh yeah, so we had like a bunch of Gene Seed and it got lost 10,000 years ago. You just went onto like a random Space Hulk and you found it. Congratulations. Or it's things like that where it's a finite resource, but it does not feel as finite as it really should be. And I just realized I'm just sitting here undercutting everything they wrote for him, and I don't really care. His victories are stupid. He is no Horus Lupercal and never will be. Horus was badass, and Abaddon is just a douche. Just saying it. I mean, come on, there's a reason why everybody calls him Fail Abaddon. He didn't earn that nickname for succeeding in his missions. Ooh, person at the far end. Looks like Alpha Pariah. Yeah, I'm not big on them deciding to redo the lore. Comes off as kinda dumb, kinda cheap. Really takes away from the experience, I think.
Did you see what I did to them?
Did you see what I did to those Eldar? Yeah, you melted them. It's pretty cool. Nope, didn't want to talk to you. Quick inventory cleaning.
Inquisitor, I have completed the preliminary tests on the samples from the Cascada Prime. The results are fascinating. I will need more samples. The plague is clearly of warp origin, most probably caused by an as yet unrecorded pathogen.
The infection is spreading like wildfire through the hive. The mutant scum and the
Yeah, I feel like all of the lore they really decided to give Abaddon is just really kind of moot. I think it would have been better to explain all of it over time as a number of different chaos groups coming together, having done stuff. You know, just be like, hey, everybody was... This is what it should have been. Those successes were done by different groups, you know, Thousand Suns figures out the Wa Demon Ritual hybrid. They do that, different groups figure out different parts, and have Abaddon be the guy who's like, hey, if we put all of this together, we can, you know, utilize these things You know, your separate victories combined do more. That would be a better bit of lore because it makes sense. You know, the Black Legion is effectively all groups united. It's Chaos United. So it would take someone like him to realize the potential of these individual victories. Otherwise, it just seems really half-assed. They could also probably even bring back like Hansu and the Daemon Kalaba, the weird failed birthing system for more Space Marines. That would be a great little bit, having a conflict between Fabius Bile and Hansu. You know, Fabius doesn't like having other people try to step into his market of the Chaos Space Marine market. Be like, hey, you can't make these guys, I make these guys. I have the monopoly on our forces, you can't undercut me with your weird giant Space Marine birthing system. And Hansu can be like, yeah, you know, lick me, I'm still doing it. I think it'd be cool, because then you could have some conflict there. Hey, Iron Warriors and Emperor's Children fighting. Once again, believable. Because they're fighting each other because they're greedy. That's something I just realized. There is no group that is, like, avarice. There's no greed Space Marines. You know, I want that. I want evil Chaos Space Marines just absolutely blinged out in gold and silver and platinum armor, diamond-encrusted bolter rounds, emeralds all over, just the greediest dudes, and that's their whole thing. I think it'd be fun. It'd be an interesting group. I figured they'd be Chaos United because I can't imagine any one group really working, like any major Chaos god being like, yeah, these are my people. Though, once again, you could introduce more Chaos gods. You know, have this conflict lead to the creation, or at least the rise of more minor gods. That'd be cool. Even from like a tabletop standpoint, you could introduce the like minor chaos gods and effectively be like, hey, they all originate from one of the big four, or big five if you want to include Malal. Shout out Malal gang. All like 5 people who like him still. You know, you have these guys are all stem from the 4 or 5, and then from there you have like a pool of generic, quote-unquote generic demons. They don't get as many bonuses, or even any bonuses, you know. You don't have the melee prowess of Khorne, the magic capabilities of Tzeentch, the purple skin and lobster hands of Slaanesh, or the snot of Nurgle. You know, you don't get any of that. They're fairly run-of-the-mill, generic ho-hum demons. But they're kind of your mainline force. Everybody else, you have... like, you get just a little core and then from the big four, big five, and then you have the rest. Because then they play effectively like a sub-faction, as opposed to trying to make like potentially dozens of demon factions with dozens and dozens of units. I mean, you could even have generic versions like Defilers. The machine lower half, demon upper half, chaos engines. Or, well, they'd be demon engines. But you could have a generic version of that. Oh, these guys don't get a Khorne version. There's a, you know, rando generic ho-hum demon slapped on top. Might work. I mean, in the end, anything is possible. I just think all this could definitely, like, things can definitely change if Games Workshop wanted to mix things up. I don't know, maybe other... What do you guys think, honestly? Because I like the idea of mixing things up, but I could be completely off base here. I might be the only person thinking this. I guess that's what it kind of boils down to is, am I wrong? I mean, it is an opinion, you can't really be wrong, but... You know, am I completely off base with this? Is this kind of a weird ask for 40k? Or is this just kind of normal? To be like, hey, we really need to mix things up. Do some changes so that this game and setting doesn't remain stale. Because come on, the Primaris Marines were not a good change. I was trying to think of the word for the moment. But they weren't a good change. Oh hey, I will always bring this up. The wheeled vehicles got hover tracks, and the hover vehicles got wheels. Why?
That's the second location secured. Through the mutant rabble Inquisitor.
Who sat down and was like, hey, you know our scout vehicles that fly so terrain isn't an issue? Let's give them wheels so that terrain becomes an issue. But you know, hey, you know our tanks? The giant moving armored boxes that, you know, terrain, it's a problem, but you're also enormous and drawing a ton of attention by shooting people. We should make those fly. Because anti-vehicle fire totally can't damage a hover track. You know, it's easier to replace a track on a tank than it is weird sci-fi hover plates. At least they haven't done that to Imperial Guard. I'm waiting though, I'm waiting for Imperial Guard to get some real stupid design choices. You know, take the Sentinels and be like, hey, let's put 2 Lehman Russ, like, Demolisher not Demolisher. No. I'm trying to think, what would they have? Because Executioner cannons are the plasma. Because I'm thinking just like the biggest cannon you can fit. And then just like slap 2 of them on. To the point where when you fire it, it just tips the thing over. Because that's kind of the direction I expect to see. Is something so absurd. And then have them still be relegated as like a scout role.
bowels of the city.
May I remind you that as long as the pathogen remains virulent in the host population, your achievement will be temporary.
When I burn out the source of...
Well, that is all for now. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the like button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.